Now, all roads lead to KwaNongoma, where a memorial service is being held for iSilo, Samabandla, King Zulu, Goodwill Zwelithini, kaBhekuzulu. Well, the monarch was planted in a private ceremony carried out by Amabuto in the early hours of this morning. Tulasiza Sumelani, of course, is there. We talk to him now to find out what exactly has been happening since. Colleague, earlier on you did quite a beautiful job just painting the picture for some of us who are still here in Johannesburg and obviously cannot come to KwaNongoma to witness the King's planting and ceremony there, just reflecting on his legacy. And I also found it quite sad that our other colleague, Nkosazana Dambuza, spoke to young children in the Zulu nation who said they were looking forward to turning 15 and meeting the King because they learned so much about him, heard so much about him. So this is definitely a country in mourning, irrespective of your age.
Absolutely, Dumi. It's unprecedented for many people who are at least younger than 50 years, who have not been in this position, in that the late King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu is the only king that people who are around 50 years and younger have known. So 5 decades on the throne. But as we wake up this morning, we wake up to a new reality that basically says that iSilo Samabandla ongangezwe lakhe indlondle inophapha ekhanda has been interred overnight, and the Amazulu will now have to take their first steps in trying to navigate this new reality and new scenario. There are practices that are already established, so there's no question about that in terms of how to proceed from here, including proceeding around the interment of the king overnight. All of those are practices that are well established. But where we are this morning is the state then comes in because, Dumi, we have this beautiful infusion in South Africa of the constitutional with the traditional. This is no coincidence. We wrote it into our constitution that the institutions of traditional leadership are to be recognized, including such things as customary law also incorporated into our law in South Africa. There are, of course, tensions from time to time. There's no downplaying that those tensions do arise, and they have over the last few years arisen as far as this particular traditional institution of traditional leadership is concerned. But somehow that tension continues and is maintained in a way that is crafty, I should say, in a constitutional state. So today, the constitutional state honors the traditional leadership and the late King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. I am joined by ENCA's Thuba Vilane, who continues to track this particular story for us. Thuba, where we are standing right now, a few hours ago, some 5 or 6 hours ago, 7 hours ago, was the scene of much activity with the final movement of the mortal remains of His Excellency, His Majesty, King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu, for that sacred interment. What do we know? What can we confirm at this particular point that happened overnight?
Exactly, it's where we are. It was the cut-off point for us. That's where we were advised and told that we can film the procession as they were moving from the mortuary up to here. And we understand that behind me here, that's where, on that marquee, that's where the rituals were performed, because there were rituals that had to be performed before the body or the remains of the king enters the house. And even this morning when we were talking to one of the princes, he was telling me that they had to open a small gate here, not the main gate, for him to leave. So that's also part of the culture and traditions of the Zulu culture, that when the king leaves his house for the final time, he doesn't leave through the main gate.
In fact, before you even proceed, Thuba, somewhere in the background behind you was where they had to carve out an opening in the fencing, this razor fencing specifically for that purpose, so that they avoid using that main gate to Waketo Mtandayo. They had to open it up here and ask some of the security services who are stationed here to move for the vehicles and the cortege to actually leave overnight. All of this happening in the middle of the night.
everything happened in the middle of the night. You know, from that process, the only thing that we can get, either from obviously from the royal family, they will tell you that everything went well. The king has been planted, and we are expecting that somebody and the king will rise again. As you know that in the next time, or in the next few days or next few months, we will have a word and a direction on who will be taking over the throne of this very important nation. As you understand that the Zulu nation is one of the biggest, not only here in South Africa, but in the continent. So Inkosi yaKwaButhelezi, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, during the days before yesterday, he was briefing the media. He did mention that there will be time where they will read the will, and we are hoping and expecting that from that will they will talk about either two things, either who will be coming in as a region as they are preparing for the main king that will be also coronated after that, but they might also be telling us who will be taking over from the king. It's not an easy moment for the nation, as you said. There are very few people who remember, who could still remember what happened in 1968 when the late king, who is the father of the departed king, Inkosi kaBhekuzulu, at the time Cyprian, passed on. So those people who are of our age now, the only king that we know of is the one that had just been planted last night or early hours of this morning.
And I love how you explained there, Tuba, the use of the word planted, because many people have been, people who are not familiar with the cultures and traditions of the AmaZulu have been puzzled by why we use this word. So this is a word that symbolizes that as much as they commit his mortal remains to the ground, but actually the king will actually rise in the king that will succeed him. And therefore there's that perpetual continuity in as far as the kingdom is concerned. So the last few moments, Dumi, we've also been showing you some of the Amabutho that are here, the maidens that are here, some of them lighting candles this morning, just in remembrance of His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. There are a number of marquees where you can hear even now the thundering of feet as people do, some of the traditional dances, and you're hearing some of the voices as people are chanting those amahubo, which is really deeply spiritual for the AmaZulu people. To me, I keep thinking about, when you think about the history of this AmaZulu people and what these valleys of Ulundi, Nongoma, and nearby areas, what they have witnessed in our history. And I think about this issue of amahubo and the kind of confusion that it sowed in the enemy camp when they encountered the English at the Battle of Isandlwana. When you hear it today, it evokes those memories, and it tells you a story of a kingdom that has survived a colonial onslaught, apartheid, and also found its place within the transition into democracy. And when you hear amahubo, it really evokes something in you. They say in isiZulu, ivusa usinga. There's no translation for that. And actually yesterday, I won't even venture one. Let's leave it there. Ivusa usinga. And yesterday is what we witnessed as the Amabutho were accompanying His Majesty on his final journey on earth. And they continue to play that role, to play a role today, despite this now being more of the democratic state coming in to take up its functions.
All right, Thulasizwe Simelane, that's where we leave it, and we'll continue to stay abreast with all activities happening in KwaNongoma ahead of the memorial service.